Metal Mule, engineered to be different.
My name is Hoskins, and I am the host and presenter of Adventure Bike TV. 10 years ago, pretty much, maybe 11 years ago, I was pretty much exclusively a sports bike rider, and in fact, I've still got one of those sports bikes here in my man cave, my Farblade. And I suppose I had sort of mini adventures. I used to go away for weekends with my mates and ride out to Wales and ride up north. But over time, those things just became go somewhere, get drunk, ride back. Less of an adventure, I suppose. Although we never really thought about them as adventures. I then watched, like many people did, that TV series 10 years ago with a couple of actors going around the world. And rang up my mate who I normally go biking with and said, look, you've got to watch this TV series. It's about two friends. It's like you and me, but they're on their bikes going around the world. He watched it, and we both decided we needed to do something a bit different, a bit more adventurous. And our end result actually was we could only get a week off of work and away from our families. So we said, what can we do in a week that would be adventurous and different? And our answer was ride to Moscow and back, which sounded great until we looked at how far it was, and it was 4,000 miles, which we planned to do in a week. And that was the start of it, really. We had a couple of bikes loaned to us by Yamaha. Not classically adventure bikes, it was an FJ1200 and a TDM 950, I think it was at the time. And just had a blast. I mean, a lot of work. Longest day was 860 miles. We got to Moscow in 3 days, 3.5 days back. And it just got me hooked on travelling on motorbikes. So I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is cancer of the lymph glands, a fairly aggressive cancer when I was just before my 21st birthday. There'd been no outward signs of it, other than I'd found a lump underneath my arm. And it was diagnosed as a very aggressive form, as in literally they said we need you to come in and start chemotherapy in 5 days' time. They said the prognosis was average, so there was a reasonable chance that they could fix it, but it wasn't guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination. And I knew a couple of guys whilst I was at university, who were also suffering with cancer of various different sorts. And there's different ways you deal with those things. So one guy became very withdrawn, didn't speak to people, stayed inside all the time. And I took the opposite view, which was embrace it. Maybe that's the right word, not embrace it, but just get on with life and deal with it, and wherever possible turn it into a party, which is kind of what I did. So even though I lost all my hair and put on loads of weight and got really, really, really quite ill, and I was a long way from my family, but my best mate who I was sharing a flat with and my girlfriend at the time were very, very supportive. And actually within a few weeks of finding out that I was ill, I was organising a charity motorcycle trip. So that's probably a good example of how you can turn something that was very negative into something that's very positive. So we organised this bike trip. We got bikes loaned to us. We dressed as chickens and rode from Plymouth up to London and back and raised thousands of pounds for charity. Which I guess kind of sets a scene for how that changes your perspective on life. Is you've got to take the bull by the horns and make the best of it, no matter what crap life throws at you. The treatment I had was that it made the ball and socket in my hip joints just basically crumble. So at the age of 23, I had my first total hip replacement. A year later, I had the other side done, and I've had 3 since, because they don't last very long. They last about 15 years, particularly when you're active. When I had it done, I was really into running, basketball, squash. Really tried very hard to keep fit. And all those things I was told not to do, even if I might be able to do them, those types of activities would just wear these new joints out. So you have to change your life. I went back to swimming, which I'd done as a kid. But again, you make the best of what you've got. Now, my view was the cancer I'd had only been fixable for 5 years. So actually I was quite lucky in that respect. Unlucky to get it, but I was lucky to get through it. And if it hadn't been for hip replacements, I'd have been stuck in a wheelchair. So I was still able to walk, I was still able to swim, and I was still able to, later years, mountain bike, but most importantly, I was still able to motorbike. I was still road biking at the time, but since then I've been able to do off-roading. I'm a very, very average off-road rider, but I do enjoy it. So the hips haven't stopped me doing any of those things.
But they do make you run funny.
Yeah, well, I don't even think of it as running. I just really can't put one foot in front of the other and run properly at all. No, not even close. I think my body has forgotten how to run. So when I rode to Moscow and back with my best mate Andrew, we filmed that for ourselves because we were just obsessed with making movies of our motorbike trips. But I thought there was something interesting in the whole endurance motorbike adventure. You know, we were riding 12, 13 hours a day. At the time, I didn't know anything about Kevin and Julia Sanders, or any of those guys who hold world records for going around the world. That I didn't know any of that. But I thought it would make an interesting TV series to see people trying to do endurance motorcycle adventuring. But I could still only ever have 2 weeks off of work. So that kind of defined what I was trying to do, which is what's an amazing travel adventure you can do in 2 weeks that was involving lots of mileage. And my idea I came up with was to go around the Mediterranean Sea. So do North Africa, Middle East and Eastern Europe and home. And I spent 2.5 years trying to find a way to get that on TV, which would take far too long and be far too boring to talk through the detail of that. But the end result was I actually got some advice from Russ Malkin, who was one of the producers of Long Way Round. And he said to me, if you've not done stuff on TV before, he said, just go and do the trip, have fun, film it as best you can. And if it is that good, someone somewhere will take it up. And that's what I did. I met Danny because he was a guest columnist for Motorcycle News, and I was trying to find somebody to go with on the trip. They sent me his details. I emailed him. He emailed me back. We spoke on the phone. 24 hours, he was coming with me. That's simple as that. It was good timing for him. He'd been through a tough year. He just needed the time out away from the limelight. And before we went, I said to him, we'll either hate each other when we come back from this, or we'll be good mates. And luckily, we are good mates. We filmed it all on a camcorder and a couple of really, really rubbish SD helmet cameras. And when I came back, I put together like an 8-minute promo of some of the best bits and why I thought it was interesting. Got a little narration to it, sent it around TV channels, and one of them took a bite at it. The post-production bit actually was harder and more challenging and more emotionally draining than anything that had gone beforehand, trying to get that done. But that's how Mad and the Med started. When Danny and I were, on the rare occasions, on our 7,000 miles and 14-day trip around the Med, that we weren't sitting on the bikes, we were just sat in the hotel one night talking about if we did another one of those trips, where would we go? And my suggestion was to do an old man's version of the Dakar Rally, because West Africa had always fascinated me. The Dakar Rally had, and I just thought I'd love to go through those areas and go through the desert and try and get a bit more off-road than where we'd been, because mostly we were on tarmac around the Med. So 2 years after we did Mad and the Med, we did Dakar Dreams. So we rode from Spain, following very, very approximately kind of where the Dakar Rally used to go, but nowhere near riding off-road because we weren't good enough, all the way to the Gambia. But this time we had a cameraman with us, some dodgy fellow by the name of Tom Woodrow, which actually became an amazing adventure because there were so many things that went wrong. Actually, the Med trip was really straightforward in many respects, but loads of stuff went wrong on the trip down through West Africa. But it made a big difference having somebody there to film you, because Daniel and I could just focus on being ourselves and the adventure, and Tom was able to film us. But actually, as it turned out, it became very much a trip about the three of us as a team. So I had hoped to do another really long trip and actually do all the way from London to Vladivostok in 2 weeks, which in theory is doable. Same distance we did around the Med, 7,000 miles. And even the Road of Bones is meant to be far more easily navigable now than it used to be. But then there was all sort of trouble in Ukraine, and Russia just seemed like a bit of a bad idea when you've only got 2 weeks to get across it. So we came up with a different idea, which was to go to the northernmost point in Europe, which had always been on my list of things to do. So we did that, 1,000 miles north of the Arctic Circle, all the way up the Arctic Highway, and back through Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia and Poland and home. Slightly bigger team this time, Tom was filming it again. But that was a TV series that was called The Great Arctic Bike Off that we did for the Community Channel. That was 18 months ago, but it was on about a year ago. Tom locked me in a car with a rabid dog until I said yes. When we came back from... No, we did the Arctic trip after we started Adventure Bike TV, didn't we? Yeah. So Adventure Bike TV was Tom's idea. He had this fantastic idea about creating a monthly internet TV show based on adventure biking, for adventure bikers, made by adventure bikers, with great entertaining content. And I was lucky enough to be asked by him to be sort of the host and the presenter. And that was 18 months ago now. And we're on episode 18, I guess. So, and it's great fun. Yeah, I'm very privileged to be able to do that. I get to meet amazing people. I get to ride lots of bikes. Go around the country and do different stuff, and it's really, really great fun. I don't read them. It's as simple as that. Tom and I have a conversation very frequently about negative feedback for Adventure Bike TV or for anything. And the answer is you're never going to please all the people all the time. And you just got to have faith that what you're doing to the best of your ability. And if you enjoy it and you're doing it as best you think you can, and you are pleasing some of the people, then that's as good as you're going to get. The example I always use is Top Gear. I mean, how many critics did Top Gear have? And yet look how popular it was. And I mean, genuinely, if somebody whose opinion I value says something that I find constructive, I'll take that on board. I don't for 1 second even think I'm, ever going to be as a presenter or a host of anything to do with TV at a point where I can't take any more advice from people. But if people have got negative things to say, actually I don't care. I do the best job I can at that point in time. Hopefully it's always getting better. And if people have got stuff to say, fine. I genuinely don't care. I don't read it. It's one very simple reason. Although there's two parts to it. It's time away from work and time away from the family. When I went and did my trip to Moscow, that was quite tough. My children were a lot smaller then. And since then, I didn't feel I could justify being away from my children on something that wasn't work, in the same way that my day job is, being away for any longer than a couple of weeks. And that felt like the right time to be away. My wife was happy with that, work was happy with it. That's what felt right. And I think it represented an appropriate amount of time that the vast majority of people could take off of work. So that's why the 2 week thing, because there's not many people in this world who can take longer than 2 weeks off at any one time to go and do a trip or an adventure. So trying to show what an amazing adventure you'd have in that space was what I was trying to do.
Metal Mule. Engineered to be different.